The Anti-Corruption Commission of Namibia held a commemoration of the International Anti-Corruption Day on the 9th of December 2020 in Windhoek under the theme Recover from COVID-19 with Integrity and Stand United Against Corruption. In his welcoming remarks, the Anti-Corruption Commission Director General, Paula Snowa, stated that corruption is a global problem which affects countries economically and people's livelihood. He therefore encouraged citizens to take responsibility in eradicating corruption.
The responsibility lies with every citizen of the world to contribute to the eradication of corruption, because it is this corruption which deprives countries of the most needed resources and hampers efforts to alleviate poverty. Namibia is among the more than 187 countries which are today state parties to the convention. These are the countries which have signed and ratified the convention. Therefore, Namibia has annually observed International Day since this day was designated by the United Nations General Assembly. And since then, Namibia has been making some remarkable progress in terms of domestication in compliance with the articles of the Convention. Honorable Minister, Honorable Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely welcome you to this commemoration, as we all have the responsibility to raise awareness and prevent corruption in our beautiful Namibia. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Speaking at the event, the Minister of Justice, Honorable Yvonne Dowsep, alluded that corruption has been recognized as one of the world's biggest development challenges that continues to pose severe threats to good governance globally.
I'm pleased to be here this morning as we join the rest of the international community to observe the International Anti-Corruption Day, which takes place every year on 9 December. Notably, Namibia has been part of the initial process that culminated into the adoption of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC. As a result, the 9th of December was designated by the United Nations General Assembly as an International Day Against Corruption, with a view to recognize that corruption is a transnational phenomenon that affects all societies, and therefore the prevention and eradication of corruption is a responsibility of all state parties. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption deprives countries' most needed resources, hampers efforts to grow the economy, investment, and create employment opportunities. Namibia is not an exception to the corrosive damage caused by corruption. It is for this reason that the government of Namibia has signed and ratified the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and many other international and regional instruments in our quest to strengthen our anti-corruption efforts. Effective fight against corruption demands concerted action. All sectors have a role to play in the prevention against corruption. Development of anti-corruption programs is paramount to the fight against corruption.
She also added, saying that Namibian government has developed a number of laws to help fight corruption. Such laws are Public Procurement Act, Whistleblower Protection Act, Prevention of Organized Act, Anti-Corruption Act, Financial Intelligence Act, among others.
Additional to the host of laws passed by Parliament, the extradition law has been amended to simplify extradition procedures so Namibia does not have to become a safe haven for fugitives. Namibia is a rule-based country, as can be seen from the text of our caring constitution. In this regard, suspects are investigated by law enforcement agencies and where evidence found brought before the courts of law, irrespective of their status in society. This is another demonstration of the government's zero tolerance for corruption. Fighting corruption is a never-ending commitment, and we do not need to relax. We must, from time to time, continue reviewing our policies and laws to ensure that they meet the present corruption challenges. The damage caused by corruption can be devastating and have long-term negative impact on the economy and the livelihood of our citizens. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan had 6 strategic objectives, namely, increased level of political accountability, preventing corruption in government offices, ministries, agencies, and public enterprises, strengthening efforts to deter corruption, conducting extensive anti-corruption education, engaging civil society and the media in combating corruption, and finally, prevent corruption in the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, with these few remarks, I now have the honor to officially launch the National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan. Thank you.
Mr. Sen Pang, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Namibia, read the message from the United Nations on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General. In his speech, Pang gave a concern that COVID-19 crisis has created loopholes for corruption, adding that the development of vaccines and treatment adds to the risk of bribery and exploitation.
Corruption drains resources from people who need them, undermines trust in institutions, exacerbates the vast inequalities exposed by the virus, and hinders a strong recovery. We cannot allow stimulus funds and vital emergency resources to be diverted. Recovery from the pandemic must include measures to prevent and combat corruption and bribery. We need broad partnerships to strengthen oversight, accountability, and transparency, building on the global anti-corruption tools provided by the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption. Action against corruption should be part of broader national and international reforms and initiatives to strengthen good governance, tackle illicit financial flows and tax havens, and return stolen assets in line with the Sustainable Development Goals.
The commemoration coincided with the launch of the Anti-Corruption Commission's first National Anti-Corruption Strategy Evaluation Report for 2016-2019, which was launched by the Minister of Justice, Honorable Yvonne Dowseb. The mission of the strategy is to develop, establish, and maintain an effective system of integrity, transparency, ethics, accountability in all sectors of society in Namibia. Ms. Christine Liswaniso, the acting head of Directorate Public Education and Corruption Prevention, gave a brief overview of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Report. Liswaniso was satisfied with the outcome of the implementation of the strategy, considering that it was done within a short period of time.
Limitations, as in any research, you should always indicate the limitations. We had few of them. Lack of funds. In this case, we would say we would have wanted maybe an external stakeholder person to do the evaluation, but we had to do it ourselves. COVID-19 became an issue. Some members did not even want to come to meetings because they were afraid to come. So these are some of the issues. But we, as you can see here, we vowed that we are going to be very professional and objective. So we covered ourselves there. Generally, from our side, we feel that we have really fared well because the strategy, the whole strategy had 75 actions, which different institutions were implementing. We found out when we did our evaluation is that out of the 75, institutions were able to implement 70 actions within the 3 years. So it already shows you and gives you an idea that people are committed to fight corruption. Different institutions were able to start. They may not have completed what they were supposed to do, but they are already working on 70 actions out of 75, only, which represent 93%, and only about 5% were not at all touched or done. So the strategy, briefly, just to give you an idea, it focused more on education. Some of the actions were related to education, educating the public on corruption. Some had to do with internal prevention measures. Some were about enabling policies and legislation, and some demanded transparency mechanisms. So you can see that it was really covering all aspects of good governance. Yes. And we findings briefly, which is almost the last part, on the issues of relevance. You want to know as well whether was it relevant? Did we need the strategy? Do we stop here? We found that these issues were actually really very relevant. In terms of relevance, yes, because we are also signatory to the UNCAC and the AU and SADC protocol, all those, Namibia is signatory to all those instruments. Therefore, it was something that was relevant for us to have the strategy. In terms of efficiency, yes, we had a steering committee which was giving direction on how we should move on. If an institution is not reporting, we take it to the steering committee. In many cases, few cases, they have met with the captains of those institutions, maybe the ED, even the minister to that level, and find out why are they not implementing. Are they struggling? They will guide on what to do. The secretariat was the ACC, which so far worked very well. The tools for monitoring were developed, so it was effective in terms of our finding. The secretariat was the ACC, which so far worked very well. The tools for monitoring were developed, so it was effective in terms of our finding. The impact, we may not talk about impact in terms of seeing things changed, because the time was really short. It was 3 years. We hope that as we move to the 5 years, we will be able to look at the impact in reality. For now, the impact will be superficial, will be maybe, we will say, there are many things that really have made a difference. For example, in terms of the public sector, because of the strategy and some actions that were there, the Office of the Prime Minister now have actually made sure that each OMA have an integrity committee in place. And those integrity committees are now trained, and they are now taken through on what they are supposed to do. So that is one. And one impact also could be that we have at least included the issues of corruption as one of the issues of major offenses in the public service staff rule. So those are some of the impacts that we have.
The commemoration ended with a panel of discussion where panelists discussed issues on how stakeholders can effectively contribute to the implementation of the second National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan of 2021-2025.